So it's been a long time since I've uploaded a video. And in that time, I've been doing,
We get freaking memed on.
I see. Oh, no!
No!
Ah!
Oh.
A lot. Most of what I've been doing, I most likely am going to make a video about, so I don't need to talk about it here. But one of the games that I picked up though, as you could guess by the video title, is Guild Wars 2. And I've been having a lot of fun with it. For those that don't know, Guild Wars 2 is a free-to-play MMO that's been around since 2012, and has some pretty interesting takes on the genre. For starters, the game is action combat instead of traditional tab target combat, meaning that you have to actually aim your skills instead of just point and click. The game also seems to have a much larger emphasis on its open world content than other MMOs that I've played, but I'll get into that later. I want to continue by saying this is not a full or comprehensive review of the game. This is more like my thoughts on the game as both I was going through it and my perspective now. Currently, I've reached max level, beaten the base game, then went on to beat the second expansion, Path of Fire. I'm in the process of getting acclimated with the endgame, and I'm on my way to getting my ascended weapons and armor. And with that being said, I want to start with my story journey. If I'm going to be completely honest, paying attention to the story wasn't my top priority when playing. But whenever I did decide to tune in, I was enjoying what was presented to me. Every cutscene is fully voice acted, including your character, take that Final Fantasy XIV, and has great voice direction. Some of the dialogue can be a bit hammy or corny at times, but overall, the story maintained its seriousness. I enjoyed the story, and I won't be getting into spoilers, but something that was really cool to me was how it's structured. The first portion is what's called your personal story. The beginning quarter, I think that's how much of the base game it is. It's directly influenced by race choice and some options chosen in character creation. I chose a human who's searching for her parents and was raised by the circus. Each race's story will eventually lead to the same point, and from there, the story is the same for everyone. Having a story that's unique to specific races in MMOs isn't something that's new, but typically, these story beats only last for like 10 or so levels. But Guild Wars' personal story lasts until like level 40, and the level cap is 80. That's fucking insane. I like the way that the story is handled because your racial story gets you introduced to a lot of characters and concepts of the world, and because it lasts for a while, it's able to make a fleshed out arc for your character and the supporting cast, and it was enough to bridge you into the main conflict of the game pretty seamlessly. But that's enough about the story. I want to move on and talk about the combat. Personally, I think the combat in Guild Wars 2 is top tier. It's easy to learn, but hard to master. Your hotbar consists of your 5 abilities on the left side of your health bar, those being your weapon skills, the 5 abilities on the right side of your hotbar, those being your utility skills, and then you have a few abilities above your weapon skills, those being your profession mechanics. I like the way that the game handles weapon skills. Each profession, that's this game's term for class, has a list of weapon types that they could use, and even when different professions use the same weapon, they still feel completely different from each other. Another aspect I like is how professions use weapons in unorthodox ways. An example of this being my favorite profession, Mesmer. Mesmers are a magic-based class, all about creating clones and illusions to do a bunch of different things. One of the weapon types they can use are greatswords, but instead of Mesmers using them as a melee weapon, they're instead used from range, shooting a giant fuck-off beam at whatever they're aiming at. It makes a really cool sound too, listen to this.
I feel good.
While I'm still on the subject of professions and the way that they play, I should take the time to talk about elite specializations. Elite specializations are basically subclasses that give you, well, a new way to play your class. Each profession gets their own elite specialization every expansion that comes out. There's 3 elite specializations per class that corresponds to each of the 3 expansions, that being Heart of Thorns, Path of Fire, and End of Dragons. Some are a bit more impactful to your profession than others, though. As an example, the Druid Elite specialization for Ranger gives you a new profession skill that gives you a new set of weapon skills and augments some of your right side abilities. Then you have an elite spec like Virtuoso, where you're still kinda just playing Mesmer, but without the clones. And this isn't really a large issue with the game, because elite specs that don't completely change the way you play a profession still give you access to a weapon type you previously were unable to use, and they still do different things from their core profession. Again, my Virtuoso is built around constantly applying conditions, this game's term for negative status effects, to the enemy, while my core Mesmer is focused a lot more on dealing raw damage. I like this game's combat a lot because it's easily approachable. You've got between 10 to 15 skills depending on profession and specialization choice, so it isn't a lot of button bloat and figuring out your damage rotation unlike some other MMOs. You're telling me this combo is just my fucking opener? Not to mention, since this is an action combat game, properly aiming your skills is a must. And because of that, I found the combat to be incredibly engaging. But, and this is a huge one of the biggest flaws in the combat is also one of the best parts of it, and one of the game's selling points. There is no Holy Trinity. For those that don't know, the Holy Trinity is a term used to describe specific gameplay style of requiring a tank, healer, and DPS. The tank keeps aggro on them, so it makes all attacks focus on the tank. The healer, heals, and the DPS does damage. One of the deciding factors in the Holy Trinity is the tank's ability to manage aggro. There is no Holy Trinity without that. Guild Wars 2 doesn't have aggro management, therefore no Holy Trinity. Well, I think not having a Holy Trinity is good because professions and elite specs don't need to fit into a rigid role. I find it a bit shortcoming when going into structured content. I don't have a ton of experience in structured content yet. My raiding experience is slim to none, I haven't really progressed super far in fractals, and I haven't touched strikes yet. So I need to play more before I get a final opinion. But something that I notice is the tank role in this game seems to be extremely lacking. Since most boss attacks are AoE skills instead of auto attacks, having a person there to soak up damage is kind of useless. I think this has huge effects on endgame PvE activities like raids, fractals, and strikes. If aggro management isn't a thing and enemies just attack at random, what's the point of playing a defensively oriented profession or specialization? This is a question I've been asking myself more and more as I play the game longer, and since I'm still very early into the endgame content, I'm not sure if they actually become important later on or not. Hopefully, defense-oriented builds get better the deeper I get into the endgame, but I'll just have to figure it out for myself. Speaking of, I'm a person who likes to read and understand the abilities I unlock, then try to figure out what's the best build for the role I want to play. The complexity of combat kind of is another pain point for me. Yes, I know I was just ranting and raving about it, but just give me a moment. Give me a second. Trust me. Guild Wars 2 is ridiculous to learn on your own without outside help. There's a lot of information to take in from the game when trying to understand it all, and it's very confusing and frustrating to get into. Stability? Non-damaging conditions? How many are there?
Oh my goodness!
What the hell is a projectile combo finisher? Not only because there are so many little parts to understanding this complex machine, but also because the game doesn't do a great job explaining things to you. While the game does have a few tutorials, most only show up once and they're basically just 1 or 2 sentences hidden away behind a button that only pops up when you reach a certain level once. Thankfully, there are outside sources available that I use that help me out a lot, specifically the wiki. And funny enough, ArenaNet, the developers of the game, implemented chat commands that bring you straight to the wiki page. I think the only real issue that I have with the wiki implementation is that the game doesn't tell you these features are here. In fact, the only reason I figured that out was because I watched some videos and they actually told me about it. I didn't find this out on I found it out through other outside information. Handholding is also something that I want to mention too, because this game doesn't really do that. And when I first started playing, I was all for it. I liked that I was just kind of able to go wherever and do whatever I wanted, but after I reached level 80, things changed for me. When I reached 80, I made the goal of getting a full set of Ascended gear. For those that don't know, Ascended gear is some of the most powerful gear you could get, but it takes a really long time to acquire for the most part. The thing is, there were so many different activities and ways and methods of acquiring these Ascended gears, and some of them with varying degrees of difficulty. I didn't really know where to start. When I reached level 80, I didn't know if I should be farming fractals, farming dungeons, strike missions I haven't unlocked yet, or if I should be doing open world metas. Technically, I could do them all so I could get essential materials faster, but my problem was, I was still in leveling gear. I didn't know how to bridge that gap between leveling gear and the top end game gear. I still needed exotics. I was in greens. Thankfully, by the time of writing this video, I'm already on my grind for the Ascended weapons and armor that I want. I've already done my research and I know what I need to do to get it. And there's going to be a follow-up video soon about that grind once I get at least one of the items. But because of that, I'm going to close out this section here. Guild Wars 2 definitely doesn't hold your hand, and while I talked a bit about why I didn't like it, I want to talk about the aspect of the lack of hand-holding that the game absolutely nails. Exploration. Something I consistently enjoyed while playing was exploring the gigantic map. The zones in the base game had tons of teleport points that you could use as long as you visited them, so getting from one area to another was an absolute breeze. Plus, and this is probably the most important part, exploration rewards you with experience. Every waypoint unlocked, every vista viewed, etc. all gives you experience, and a good amount too. So much experience that I leveled one of my alts almost entirely through exploring the map. And I've gotta say, for an MMO that came out in 2012, this game has some top tier scenery. I really wish I recorded my genuine reaction to exploring Divinity's Reach for the first time, because the amazing scenery and the sense of scale that made the city feel so much larger than it actually was.
You know, something that is pretty fucking sick about this game is that it is absolutely massive from what I've seen, like, and what I've played, so this is gonna be really fun, like, when I get into it, or when I eventually, like, really get into it.
Besides just the cities, every other explorable area has so many nooks and crannies that have no indicator that they're explorable, and going through these areas rewarded you with XP, and sometimes even items at the end. Sometimes I'd find myself inside these open world dungeons with little mini puzzles to solve and enemies to fight, and I enjoyed every part of exploring that world on my main and alt. And even as I make more alts for different professions, my primary method for leveling them is going to be running around the open world on my mount. Speaking of open world, the last thing I want to talk about here is the open world content. Guild Wars 2 has dynamic events that spawn in the open world called metas, and these can range from small tasks like escorting an NPC across the map to large-scale encounters like gigantic world bosses. And I gotta say, they're pretty fucking top-notch. As a new player, it was the coolest thing ever just walking around in a level 15 zone and seeing a bunch of max level players piled up. Immediately when I saw that, I knew what was up and hit the record button. And moments later, a shadow behemoth spawned that was so fucking gigantic that I needed to zoom my camera all the way out and angle it to see it all. It was the perfect initial hit of excitement to keep me wondering about what the game had in store for me next. Because if it's this fucking good at the start, then the only way from here is up, right? Spoiler alert, it gets fucking godlike.
We did it.
But Suwan's in pain. Come, we must save her from herself. Meet me at the temple. She's close. Be ready.
Look. The world is empty. A landscape of shattered dreams and death.
2S1.
And all due to me.
So those are my first impressions on Guild Wars 2. So far, I've enjoyed spending my time playing, and I think I'm going to keep enjoying spending time in the world of Tyria. There's a lot that I didn't talk about here, but I'm going to save those words until a later video, which will come after I get more extended gear. Thank you for sticking around to the end, and if you have any information you want to give me, want to talk about the game, or even ask how my day's going, be sure to leave a comment down below. Until next time, stay safe.